Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 860. I'm Tom Cagley, your host today. The SPaMCAST 860 features our conversation with Paul Gibbons. We discussed his new book, Adopting AI, The People First Approach, which he co-authored, by the way, with James Healy. This is not our first rodeo with Paul, our first conversation with Paul. They've all been fabulous. Today, we get into AI, we get into ethics, all of the hot button issues of this decade. Paul Gibbons is a keynote speaker and author of 5 books, including 4 of which I own, including the acclaimed Adopting AI, The People First Approach, which we talked about today. Link in the show notes, by the way, to buy a copy. It came out in March 2025. Before that, he was IBM's thought leader on the future of work. And before that, a professor of business leadership at the University of Denver. In the Jurassic era, he was CEO of Europe's top leadership consulting firm. He lives in Denver with his 2 sons, enjoys F-45 and competitive high-stakes poker. Are you ready to talk adopting AI? It's time for the conversation. Due to a technical error on my part, the opening is abrupt. 1 minute of chit-chat was lost. We dive in really abruptly. Paul Gibbons, author of Adopting AI, The People First Approach, a book that you wrote with James Healy. Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast. Paul, let's dive right in. What's AI?
It'll be a flexible intelligence. It'll be able to solve problems. It'll be a creative intelligence. That's something that people don't think AI can do. I think they're wrong, but we'll get into that later. But so creativity, problem solving. Some people would want to add in moral reasoning. So part of a human intelligence is able to decide between right and wrong. I don't do such a good job of that as human beings, so I can't expect AI to do that much better. But yeah, those are the sorts of faculties. And then there's artificial superintelligence, which is an intelligence that's so unlike our own, so vastly superior to our own that we would be like snails to it. And people think about ASI, it's kind of funny. They think, oh, they'll be a little bit smarter than Einstein or about as smart as Einstein. No. There won't be much difference between an Einstein and a gorilla. As far as if it's super intelligence, there's, the fact that we're using this word, it's an imaginative thing, obviously, because there hasn't been one built, but it could potentially be so vastly superior to human intelligence. We wouldn't be able to fathom what it's doing, just like a snail can't fathom what I'm doing when I scroll my phone. Like, how do I explain to it when I'm facilitating a meeting what I'm doing to a snail? Well, the intelligence would be so much better than that we wouldn't be able to comprehend this internal logic. So that's the kind of framework that people usually use. Is that one that more or less resonates with what you've heard?
It's in the neighborhood. I mean, that's the problem, right? Is that everyone wants to focus on something very, well, generally, the experts that we have on generally want to focus on one place or one layer, whether it's just a large language model or something in terms of agents, those sorts of things. They'll focus in those areas versus taking that broader view, which I really enjoyed in the first chunk of the book. I don't know how many things I highlighted as I was going through my Kindle version of that and say, okay, well, I got to go look up that and think about that for a little while. Why'd you write the book?
Oh, I wrote it, I started writing it a year ago, and I was going to call it Leading AI, but the title more, as you write, and research, you discover there's more things you want to say. You want to say some things that you weren't necessarily going to say the first time, or something that was going to be a paragraph turns into a chapter, something that turns into a chapter. Like, there's going to be 1 chapter on ethics, now there's 5, right? I mean, come on. And that's just what happens, because once I get into writing and researching and thinking about it, it just kind of explodes. But I wanted to write one for, it was going to be primarily a business book, and now it's, way, way more than a business book. Of course, you could say it's way, way less than a business book, because there are books devoted in their entirety from page 1 to page 200, how to make it work in organizations. None of them are, by the way, this isn't well-traveled territory yet, so a lot of these are speculative. There's a lot more talk about AI than there is adoption of AI still in the world. But the book turned out to be a much broader treatment. So it's number 1 in Australia in technology and society, for example. So people are treating it more as a book that's a commentary on how AI fits with civilization, which, is where it ended up. So that's where it ended up. But when it started off to be a book for business people, to help them navigate some of the challenges of understanding this new intelligence, to make this new intelligence work for them, to putting ethical guardrails around this new intelligence. Why do I write books? I generally is because I love writing. That's and my business model revolves around writing. But I say business in inverted commas because it's not a very profitable thing to do by itself. I get $6 a book or something like that. And while there are business books that sell 100,000 copies, they're very, very few. Most business books sell fewer than 1,000. All of these self-published books, someone says, I'm a published author. Usually that means 500 copies, 1,000 copies. So it's just not very profitable by itself. So I do a lot of the stuff I do in AI. It's like keynote speaking and running workshops for, 25 to 250 people around the world. So, and it's a very hot topic right now. So anyway, that's why I wrote the book. I thought I had some interesting things to say about AI in business, and it ends up being much more, or again, you could say much less, right? Because there's only now 70 pages on making AI work inside businesses. I guess that's the part that you spent a lot of time with is AI skills, AI upskilling, AI and change management, AI and strategy. I guess that was
I did. So
by the way, we didn't tell listeners the title of the damn thing.
Yeah, we did. I actually said the
did
title.
you? Oh, did you?
I said, I remember very clearly saying, adopting AI, the people first approach.
Buy now while supplies last. Anyway, we were going to talk about.
Well, hey, if it's number one in Australia, that means your publisher got good distribution right off the bat. We had trouble with my last one in Europe with it not getting to Europe as fast as it should have. But regardless, you mentioned the sort of the fun part of all of this AI stuff. Having been through a few of these cycles in the world, the hype generally precedes adoption by a while. And so whether or not there are, millions of organizations using AI, the hype is certainly there. I recently listened to an ad as I was lifting weights in the basement that said, hey, we're here to help you. Big 3-letter consulting firm. We have people, 10,000 consultants that are experienced in using the AI to, help your organization. And all I can think of is, well, I don't know 10,000 firms that actually they're talking about it, but I don't know that there are 10,000 firms that use it. Where did they get all of this experience?
That's an incredible thing. Yeah, where did they get that? I mean, that's what professional services firms do. They do overclaim, right? For listeners who don't know, I've spent like 15 years in professional services firms. And then after that 15 years professional services firm, I've been an advisor to professional services firm to help them, as the kids say today, glow up, is the kids' expression, to help them glow up their methodologies and change management and so forth. So I've been most of my recent life professional services firm. We're not prone to understatement.
Of course not. Of course not. Overstatement. I don't know.
I don't know where they'd find 10,000 people who'd had enough experience using it. I'm working with one firm right now as an advisor. It's a consulting firm, and they're actually working with a very blue chip organization, try and help them adopt AI using the approach we talk about in the book, sort of a bottom-up, people-first approach. And so
explain to the listeners a little bit about what a people-first approach would look like and why a people-first approach is actually the right answer.
It's because it's a sort of paradox, is that the more powerful the technology becomes, the more important the human side becomes. It's sort of a paradox. And AI is not like Salesforce or SAP, which is kind of one size fits all. You just kind of ram it in and, there's some customization, but you don't really ask users. That's not like that. They have to, and also, CRM systems and SAP and the big technology implementations, so you kind of know what they do. I mean, they were doing some things that humans have been doing for a very long time, whether it's accounting or client relationship management or whatever. So that AI doesn't do that because it's, of course, called general purpose technology. So if someone says, what does it do? Well, it does what you ask it to do. If you ask it to give you a recipe for chicken parmesan, it will do that. But if you asked it to try and explain the theories and reconcile quantum gravity with, modern cosmology or something like that, it'll do that too. And now, increasingly with AI agents, it's not just going to talk about stuff; it can do stuff. And so there's multiple instances in the world, but Gemini's got one, ChatGPT's got one where you can actually access your browser and it can kind of begin to do stuff. And right now, those applications are yawn, like booking a holiday or booking a restaurant in a nice part of town. Like, who gives a monkeys, as we say in England, about that? But these AI agents will become increasingly powerful. Of course, for them to be powerful and useful, they have to be autonomous. And the more autonomy we grant this thing, the more risk we take on. So an autonomous trading bot, there was something called a flash crash in the stock market. I can't remember exactly what year, it might have been 87 or something like that, where all the algorithms spazzed out together. And the stock market lost like stupid. I can't remember exactly the flash crash because they were correlated, and it's a horrible snowball effect. So once we grant these trading algorithms, and hopefully there are enough guardrails around stock market crashes now, who knows? Who cares, right? But anyway, but we need those kind of guardrails around AI because as it becomes autonomous, which is what you want it to do. I mean, if I want to do stuff for me, I don't want them looking over his shoulder, micromanaging it. So as it becomes increasingly autonomous, and I think we may not be far from an AI-only company. There's also already things called multi-agent systems that we talk about in the book, where you string together agents that have different parts of the puzzle. They could be, example, used in law to pick up different parts of the legal process to great effect. And I think there will be AI-only companies where basically there'll be, an owner and a human at the top for now, but they'll be doing all the work for us.
That's the difference between one of those soon, utopian and dystopian outcomes.
Within 5 years. Well, that's the thing. How do you teach it right and wrong? I mean, that's a question that's part of the people first approach, by the way, is SAP and CRM. People first adoption says ethics is a big part of it. Well, in ethics, I mean, I know, please disagree because I know you're an expert in this, but technology is kind of, in some sort of sense of the word, SAP is morally neutral. It doesn't present. You're shaking your head. So okay, correct me or
no, I'm wobbling my head. The argument, in theory, it should be more morally neutral, right? It really depends. Something like SAP on the code, right? So the code might not be. So, and it's just going to execute the code. Again, we get into the AI side, and it's what kind of data do we use to train this? And if we're just using one variety of people, is it, it's going to execute. It's going to, at least the code side is going to execute how it carves out, its assumptions and things like that. That's where I think it gets really messy in terms of AI.
But SAP not so much, right? It doesn't have that.
You can go in, you can patch the code in SAP. What are you going to do? Dump all the data in a large language model or something greater than that?
Yeah. So ethics has to be part of it because you have these people who are messing around with AI at work. There's an example in the book of a lawyer who got a brief from a client. He wanted to sue an airline. It wasn't a huge thing. And one of the things they do is they prepare a brief, which I've never been a lawyer, but one of that, they do case law, right? They write 6, 10, 12, 20. I mean, some of these things can be 2,000 pages, I assume, but, pages, citing all the relevant case law, putting that case forth in front of a judge. And this guy used AI for it. He said, ChatGPT, give me the case law for this. And then he said, ChatGPT, write me the brief, which is a lot of work, right? I mean, I don't know what a young lawyer would take to write a brief. I mean, it depends what you mean by brief, but I mean, it could take them a week, right? To do the relevant, depends, how complex it is, right? ChatGPT will have it done in under a second, right? If you say, this is the circumstance, you write a paragraph prompt on the situation, it'll spit one out, 10-page brief in a minute. And lawyer did this anyway. He was an early adopter, God bless him, 2023, this is from, and he shoved it in front of the judge. And the judge says, what's this case law here? And the guy's like, "Oh, Simmons versus 1954." The judge says, "There's no such case, bro."
Yeah, probably tried to praise.
The AI had made up all this case law and the opposing counsel and how. I'm surprised the guy has a license because that just seems to me stupid. I mean, you wouldn't. People say, "Oh, that's why AI is unusable," but it's just a stupid thing to say, right? You wouldn't have a junior lawyer prepare a brief and not look it over as a senior lawyer. And then this guy,
there's got to be a feedback loop.
Click the lazy option, and that applies to AI in education too. Because my kids are using it all the time. One's in high school, one's in college, to help. I'd say it would be negligent not to, right? It would be like writing without Microsoft Word or without a thesaurus, 40 years ago. I think, not using the tools at your disposal. But I'm saying don't cheat. Your professors aren't idiots, right? So there's the cheating version, which is write me a paper. My son's writing one on Islamic sociolinguistics, God bless him. And I said, write me a paper on XYZ from Islamic sociolinguistics. It'll spit one out in a second. If you hand that to your teacher, you're going to get an F, quite rightly so. And you might even get expelled. So I said, you use it as a research tool, use it to structure your thinking, use it to this, but you go a level deeper. Don't take the lazy option. First of all, you're shortchanging your own learning because you're not learning shit, right? You can edit that one out. I think you're a family podcast. You're not learning anything when you do Control-C, Control-V, right? You're not learning anything. And so, but that's not the fault of the kid. That's the fault of the education system. If you
it's not the fault of the AI either.
Not really. Yeah, that's the last thing you can blame is the AI, right? They're making sensible use of it. But if you ask a question like, how many planets, 8th grade science, how many moons does Jupiter have, right? And put it in AI, 64. You're not really learned anything from that process discovery. But you can ask much better questions than that in a science test, like, how is the process of the formation of Jupiter's moon similar to the formation of the moon and the Earth? Or why do you think it has 64 moons and the Earth and Mars have 1 and 2 respectively? And you can begin to ask interesting questions, which you could still be guided with AI, but you've got to think about the questions to ask. And that's one thing for sure, is that AI will teach you to ask better questions. Because if you ask it dumb questions, like how many moons does Jupiter have? As it goes, okay, it says 64. It's like, whatever, like nobody's any the wiser. But if you ask it more complicated questions, you get better answers. And it gets smarter as you use it better. And that's the other thing too. So it can do things that are unimaginably complex. So in ChatGPT, if you click on deep research, right? And I was asking it, there's a medical condition in my family and a very complex condition. The treatment's very complicated. Or something like that. And I said, I'd like you to review all the scientific research for coarctation repair of the aorta using differential diagnosis and blah, 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 blah. And I like to tell me up to the minute 2024 research on all of this. Now, for that, it takes like 30 minutes, right? So deep research goes away and it's doing its thing and it's doing its thing and it's telling you what its thought process is.
Agent probably to do that.
These are large reasoning models. So what they're doing is they're being very transparent about their thought process. Just one thing. So it says, I'm looking at this journal. I'm synthesizing that and sort of generating hypotheses. I'm reconciling the hypotheses with the next paper I write. So it tells you what it's doing and doing that. But if you asked it to a very, very complex medical situation, it'd take about 30 minutes, but it produced 10 pages for me on this complex situation. And so, you ask it dumb questions, you get dumb answers, but you ask it difficult questions, it gives you, thoughtful, well-considered, I think. And how long would it take someone else to do that? How long would it take if I was doing a doctorate or I was a professor, had a grad student do that, how long would it take it to do that thing that GPT took 30 minutes to do?
Days, weeks.
Maybe more, right? I mean, that's what people, the volume of, in an active scientific field, there'll be 100,000 articles a year published.
So here's the problem. And
here's the problem. Right.
There are a couple of problems.
Slow me down. I'm rambling on here.
Oh, no, it's a good ramble. It's a good ramble. There are a couple of issues here. First off, I'm all in on using AI responsibly. I don't know really what that means. I especially don't know what that means at a school level, right? So, and unfortunately, I don't think there's a dialogue about that. It's, school board will decide and tell us, and that may or may not. So you'll have one school system over here that says, okay, you can reasonably use the idea of an AI. Over here, it's like if we even sense that you're using an AI, you're out of here kind of thing. And you get these huge gaps in terms of implementation. especially when there's no federal overview of that. But that may
Sure.
So
I mean, I've had one of my sons was accused of using AI to write something, and he didn't. It was a screenwriting class he was taking, and I said, "Well, did you?" And he said, "Not at all for this one, actually. I had it grammar check me, and that's all." But the teacher accused him of it. So that's one extreme, and there's other extreme that says if I have AI, any sniff of AI in this, I'm going to fail you in the class. There are other, and I think that's the clever thing because it's here to stay, right? It's like insisting that kids use slide rules in 1970. Why would you do that, right?
why would you do that now? Yeah, absolutely.
Why would you prohibit people using an electronic calculator to do addition and subtraction and multiplication? You wouldn't do that. The tool will be used, and it will be used to create because you could produce much better work at any level, from the PhD, medical research level, all the way down to third grade.
But where does the basic? So, and this is an issue in the software world where AI now is starting to write code. I was actually using an AI to write some code this morning.
Yeah, I know it does. Yeah, my kid's in an R programming class,
and I'm not 100% sure that I thought it was any good, so I tweaked it. But regardless of that, there was a feedback loop in there. The question I have, and I've discussed with a number of folks, is okay, if all of this basic stuff, all of the things that a newbie programmer, a first level programmer in an organization would get their chops learning where the libraries, all of that kind of stuff by doing things that were safe, you go out and write this sort of module. You do that with an AI now. You don't need those people. Where do people actually get experience if we take all of this away from them?
Well, that's the great question.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I have a friend who runs a technology company, and he's like, I don't need coders anymore. I need architects. I said, but buddy, how do you become an architect?
Yeah.
You got to learn to code. He says that's exactly the problem. A lot of these entry level jobs are going to be replaced. And I used to love coding and something like that, but architecting is a kind of more complex job, right? I mean, so we're getting to do the more interesting part of it, which is how do we get this thing to do things rather than think. Now, I have.
But how many architects do you need versus how many coders did you need?
What a very fine question. Yeah, and where we're seeing effect on the marketplace. And I will say right now for listeners, AI hasn't really taken any jobs away from anyone yet. So there was a great horror story in 2020, 2019 when I was beginning to give talks on AI and its effect on jobs, 100 million jobs lost. Well, that may come to pass, but probably what will happen, we're hearing now, is that there'll be, the same sort of order of magnitude of jobs created. However, what will probably happen is the jobs will be destroyed, and then there'll be a passage of time, and then some jobs will be created. It's just kind of like manufacturing, right? As you well know, living in the part of the country you do, if you begin to shut down manufacturing, what do you do with the people who worked in manufacturing? Well, you reskill them and you train them and you.
But we don't reskill them. That's not what happens in the United States. What we do is they live in places that are decaying.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Margaret Thatcher shut down the mining industry in the north of England and Scotland, where my family lived, and all of these coal miners were put out of work, and most of them. How do you retrain a 50-year-old coal miner, to learn Python? I don't think so, bro. So, you could. I have an uncle who did so, but it's 1 in 100,000, right?
Right.
They'll live on government benefits for the rest of their days, which is, a poor substitute for work, because that's one of the questions for AI. That's a big existential question: is if it takes away work, increasingly takes away work of all kinds. From people, what meaning do we derive? Like, if we have to work less, what meaning is there left at work? Because we don't work just for a paycheck, right? Depends on the kind of work you do. But you and I work because we like our work, and our work has a certain meaning, and we're contributing to the bigger picture. And and its loftiest goal, a book like Adopting AI will be good for humanity, and there'll people read it, and it'll provoke certain lines of thinking and more ethical deployment of AI. So there's a nobler purpose there. That's where I get my meaning from. You could say it's diluted, but that's my hope anyway. That's my vision. My purpose, if you will, is to kind of reshape these conversations around AI. But it's an interesting one, right? I mean, it's already, you can see in McDonald's, by the way, robots making fries. I mean, if you think that McDonald's will need 15 people behind the counter making food, in 5 years' time, you're smoking crack.
Well, they're already scaling down the number of people behind them.
Yeah.
So those jobs are going away.
Computers
also
in the lobby now. I mean, welcome to McDonald's. It's a computer screen now. I mean, I was very disappointed when I went in there the other day. Not to welcome McDonald's. Would you like fries with that? Just like computer screen.
Well,
anyway,
you walk through Chicago Airport I was walking through, and it's the one on Concourse C is pretty much all touch screens and things. Let's touch on agents a little bit, because I think agents are something that a lot of my listeners may not have thought a lot about. And there was a chunk of the book that I don't know, it took me 2 or 3 morning runs to actually wrestle with. The idea of agents and agents working on our behalf makes a ton of sense to me. The question is, who's going to own the agents, and how is that going to work when we're actually using agents as our entree into the AI world?
Well, you want AI to do stuff for you. So the simplest form of agent is what's called a reflex agent. When a spam email, not, by the way, any relationship to the SPaMCAST, I want to hasten to add, but the spam email comes in, there's a reflex agent which says, put it in your trash or junk email or quarantine it or whatever the protocol is, right? It's something like that. And that's using AI, by the way, because you need AI. Cyber attacks are becoming so sophisticated. The days of the Nigerian prince and we've got $1 million if you just send me your bank account details. Those are gone. They're much cleverer than that now. They're using AI to what it enables you to do is target and generate more specific Paul Gibbons centered email. So one of the most annoying set of emails I get are emails that refer to my age. But anyway, so that's a simple reflex agent. It's doing stuff for you, but there's no human in the loop there, nor would you want there to be a human in the loop there or something like that. So that's one sort of simple class of agent, but another more complicated can do an end-to-end chain, what they call a multi-agent system, operating autonomously. It does autonomously. The legal process is one that's very amenable. So one of the good things about AI is there'll be half as many lawyers in the world in 10 years' time.
So let's take that.
A very good thing for humanity. If I could have a swipe at the legal profession.
That's fair. That's fair. Let's pick on that just for a second. So there are these chains of fully autonomous agents doing case management.
Yeah.
Is that a service that someone like an SAP, the big firm owns and leases to everybody, and therefore
they're all over it? Yeah, Salesforce agents.
So let's say that's true.
Yeah.
Do they then own the training data? Can they then constrain what that agent can do, and therefore influence the law? Just because they own the agent, you don't, even though you might be the lawyer that's overseeing that.
And this is a very complex thing: is the accountability question. Is who's accountable when AI makes a mistake? There's a cartoon in the book of AI standing over a man in a hospital bed saying, the AI said the hysterectomy was
I love that. I love that.
Successful. Sure.
I looked at that like 3 or 4 times and went,
who's accountable? If a Tesla hits a pedestrian, who's accountable? Is it the software? Is it the car driver? Is it the engineer? Is it Tesla senior leadership? Is it the training data? You can look down the supply chain as well and look for accountability in it. But we don't want to conflate accountability and liability. So now we're talking about liability and that. So, but who's ultimately accountable? So it's a great question. Yes, they'll be owned by the things, and usually it's the user who's responsible. So if I write a paper, for example, using AI to help me with research, and the paper's full of shit, then it's my accountability. No, I can't just say, oh, my bad. So that's the rule. But does that rule, as they become increasingly autonomous, does that kind of human accountability rest? Because clearly in the case of a Tesla, it's not the driver who's accountable for hitting the pedestrian, right? Yeah. I mean, if you've got it set to level 5, it's not supposed to do that, right?
It's not supposed to.
So, and it's going to happen, right? Yeah. I mean, so you may say, okay, now it's 2025, right? we don't really have much in the way of level 5 self-driving cars. By the way, I just rented a level 2 self-driving car.
Ooh, cool. How did that go?
For a drive to Wisconsin. It's pretty amazing, but it's also kind of creepy because your hands aren't on the wheel, and it's adjusting here, and it's got adaptive cruise control, and it's got all this kind of like clever stuff that it does. It will do the parallel parking for it, so we'll never have to do parallel parking in a driving test ever again, because you just push a button into the car. So, but we want that. It was kind of an interesting experience, but again, it was kind of creepy in a way, and alien, because you're in a car, you're used to the sense of mastery and control and everything like that. And now you don't have that anymore, or at least some of it's taken away from you, mostly to good effect, by the way. If you have the cruise control at 80 and Granny is in the fast lane doing 62, you don't have to turn off the cruise control anymore. AI senses, has, LiDAR or radar, I'm not sure about the visualization technology, and will back away from Granny and keep 4 car lengths distance. So having an adaptive cruise control was, again, it's like, whoa, what are you doing, bro? Really, 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 really kind of fun stuff. But I just want to say to listeners, that's the kind of baby stuff of AI right now. Self-driving cars is like big whoop, right? Who cares? Email autoresponders, who cares, right? It helped me book a restaurant, who cares? Well, the exciting stuff is having AI transform scientific discovery. That's the stuff, and healthcare. Because right now, it's already cleverer than a cardiologist at reading an EKG. It's cleverer than a radiologist at reading an X-ray. It can see things that they can't see. Why can it do that? Because it's pattern recognition. The resolution with which it can detect something in an image is much higher. That's exciting, because by the time that a human can visualize through some kind of imaging technique a cancer, it's already 1 billion cells. If this thing can begin to recognize patterns before they happen, cancers before they happen, already you've made a breakthrough. And that's just part of the cancer puzzle. If it's beginning to understand the process of oncogenesis at a cellular or molecular level, which it is, it's being trained on this now. There are people, intelligent people, who think cancer will be wiped out in 5 years, both from early detection and having treatment modalities that'll just basically arrest it before it happens. And we kind of have. This is an old story, right? Cancer is way more true. You used to get colon cancer, it was lights out. Right? Mm-hmm. Now, you got a 20 years, prognosis if they catch it early enough. So anyway,
agree.
So that's the stuff I'm excited about. I could give a shit about self-driving cars, like, whatever. I think the people first essence is, let's have it do that really good stuff for humanity. And the other stuff, and unfortunately right now, most AI deployment is the hand of corporations. So they're doing the things that are most profitable, not the things that best for humanity. Now, sometimes those things coincide, and that's a wonderful thing. And sometimes they conflict, and that's not a wonderful thing.
Yeah, we could have, we could have that shareholder stakeholder conversation.
We could have that shareholder. But what is this anyway? Like, I don't know. You've had a lot of conversations about this with different guests over the last little while. What are your own thoughts about?
It's funny. The mood is changed, or has changed, over the past couple of years. It was very utopian a couple of years ago. It is becoming more and more dystopian at this point. And for the reason that that people now just say, well, jobs are going to be, we're going to we are destroying jobs, and we're going to continue to destroy jobs, and it's not our problem in terms of retraining people and things like that. That's not on our radar. Somebody else has
nobody gives a shit about that stuff.
And that to me takes us down sort of a dystopian path. I'm actually more worried about the constraints that are put on training data. And I think again, the book, I think, handles some of that very well, pointing out some of the pitfalls of that. More and more, people are saying, you can't train on my data. It's mine. And therefore, the stuff...
Yeah, all that stuff it trains on was put out there by a human at some stage in the world. It was created by a human being. Like, what right do you have to do this? Basically vacuum up all the data in the world. And the New York Times and The Economist and The Guardian, the sort of high-quality end newspapers are like, you can't train on our shit anymore. So that's fine. But the problem with that is you start removing the high quality stuff, the paywalled journals, high quality journalism, and you're left with X and Reddit and all the bullshit that you get there. although there are people who have the opposite view, by the way. I have friends who would never read anything that get all their news from X and Reddit. And they think that I'm full of shit because I read the New York Times. And I think they're morons because they read X and Reddit. I've just offended 100% of your listeners, by the way, there.
No.
But if AI only trains on low quality data now from the public domain, so there's anyway, there are conversations in place for this. But also when it steals artists' work, if I ask it to write something in the style of Hemingway, it'll do that. Hemingway doesn't get any dough from that.
But Hemingway is quite dead, albeit his family and the foundation.
He's like Elvis. He's coming back, bro.
Oh, okay. Well, what they're going to make an AI? Well, they could. Of course, we could train an AI to be Hemingway, just like we trained an AI to be Princess Leia, sort of thing.
We did, and a lot of that was the strike, the SAG-AFTRA strike, which was in the rearview mirror now, that caused Yellowstone to be delayed for 2 years. But the SAG-AFTRA strike was partly to begin to protect artists' the right to use my likeness, for example. But the thing is with AI and image generation is you can have a likeness, and when does a likeness not become a license? So there's 3 pictures of the Mona Lisa, which are derivative, and they're clearly the Mona Lisa, but they clearly aren't doing Mona Lisa things, right? One's got like headphones on and is DJing, or not. It's not. You could do that, right? So if Da Vinci were alive today, he'd be rolling over in his grave. But would we have to compensate him for the use of that likeness? When does the derivative of an artwork become theft is the question, or when does scraping data become theft? I mean, there are people who think everything AI does is basically theft, right? Yeah. Now, I think that's rather an extreme view. Sam Altman has argued, well, if we're not allowed to train on copyrighted data, then we don't have a business model, and everyone goes, okay, boo-hoo, Sam. Well, you mean if you can't steal shit, you don't have a business? You should have said that to Al Capone, bro. I mean, Al Capone had the same defense as you. I can't steal shit. I don't got a business.
Well, let's face it. The interpretation of what stealing is, or what's right and wrong, that changes as context and time passes by. Paul, we could go on forever. I'd like to ask one more question before we start to wrap. Based on where you started and where you started on adopting AI and where you are now, are you still as optimistic? Is this technology, is it a neutral technology? Is it a dystopian technology, or is it a utopian technology?
There are 7 scenarios in the book, everything from 100 million people unemployed and mass unrest and refugees, economic refugees, to blowing out the biosphere, to automating the really interesting part of work so that we're left with all the scut work. There was a great quote on Twitter. So someone once said, she said, I want AI to do the dishes and clean the house so that I can write, not AI to do my writing so I can clean dishes and do the house. But anyway,
and that is a phenomenal quote.
Whether it isolates us more from each other, even more than before, through this disintermediation, whether the AI therapist is a new thing, right? So, think of that what you may. AI companions is a new thing. There was a very disturbing movie called Her, which I happened to look up, which is about a guy who falls in love with his thing. The benefits can be lopsided. So if you want to take things like AI could be used to increase lifespan for a very few people who have access to very sophisticated treatments, or it could increase wellness throughout the population. It could go either way in every scenario. First of all, I've never studied anything since maybe my undergraduate days when I was doing research science, which is the 1970s, dear listeners, as interesting and as complex. In fact, I would say it's the most complex thing I've ever studied at every level. And I don't even dive into the neural network level, or the backpropagation level, and the convolutional neural network level. I'm not talking about that level. I mean, that's an interesting level all by itself. But I'm talking about the ethical level, at the business use case level, at the healthcare applications level, because it's so widespread and it touches literally everything: art, education, technology, business, science, medicine, healthcare, agriculture. It touches every single domain of human existence, this thing, because it's a general purpose technology. So I'm overall optimistic that it will move those forward. On the other side, 90% of the money that's being spent on AI is being spent by the corporate sector and not by research institutions or human beings. Most of the use is initially going to be aimed at making businesses more profitable, which, is a good thing. Wealth generation is a good thing. Economic efficiency is a good thing, and everything like that. But I would rather see it redirected towards, how do we think about ending world poverty? How do we begin to think about arresting the climate crisis now? How do we think geoengineering to begin to reverse some of the effects of, all these? I would like to point at those questions. How do we make nuclear power safe? How do we develop fusion energy? I would like to see it like pointed at things like that would be useful for everybody, and less pointed about how do we make self-driving cars, for a very few people. And I said something about lifespan, kind of interesting, because one of the things that you have to read is Dario Amadei's Machines of Loving Grace. If you haven't got that, it's free on the web.
I actually did write that down. I do not have it. I wrote it down as I was going through the book.
Really good essay, because he's both really techno-optimistic. He runs a company called Anthropic that makes Claude, which is a kind of a GPT wannabe. I mean, that's a disservice to them. I mean, it's almost as good. It's in a way, Claude is more human in the way it interacts with you. It's more emotionally literate. So there you go. Take that with a grain of salt. But he's CEO. He's both a techno-optimist, but he's also like, people are misunderstanding just how scary and awful this thing could be if we let it out of control. So he's both ends. He's a CEO of one of the top 5 AI companies in the world, Anthropic. And he's also like, we got to get our shit together and regulate this thing. Singularly, when California tried to pass legislation, all of the other guys are howling like, oh, you can't regulate this and whatever. He was the only guy that's like, this is good legislation. We need to pass this now. That was the only piece of AI legislation, by the way, in the United States that has any guardrails, protections right now. Right now, it's the Wild West. There is no federal level I always chuckle because Sam Altman is just petitioning for deregulation of AI. Bro, it's unregulated right now. The only thing that's regulated is whether you can steal people's freaking data. So, there's no AI regulation protecting consumers in the United States, which is an extraordinary thing given how powerful it is. So anyway, I got on a little bit of a rant there, but because we need more regulation of artificial intelligence, not to block its development, but just to give it guardrails so that consumers have some sort of protections from abuses. One of the things in the European law, for example, is it can't manipulate you. Anything that AI is being used to manipulate you is considered to be bad, whether that's phishing, which is video phishing, which I think is just really, in the book, there's this guy who works as a senior banker trying to transfer $26 million. He went into a Zoom meeting, but everybody in the Zoom meeting was an AI avatar. And he was speaking to AI avatars, and he was deceived to sending 26 million to someone. He must be kind of stupid, because I'd like to think I could tell the difference between an AI avatar rendition of my CEO and the real CEO, but apparently this guy couldn't. So there's all kinds of more powerful attacks coming your way. I just think we need some protections as a society, and we just don't have any right now. It's basically Silicon Valley free for all, which is a shame, right? Because this thing can do a lot of good. It can also do a lot of harm, and we need to steer it towards the good and away from some of the more harmful use cases that will assault our privacy, and so on. I hope that's not too much of an ethical rant there.
No, that's fine. My listeners are okay with a little bit of an ethical rant on occasion. It isn't something.
I hope they're okay with this, right? Yeah.
They'll be fine. I'm sitting here just licking my chops to go through it again. At the base, right? At the base, this is not something we can put our head in the sand and pretend will go away.
No, it's here. The genie doesn't go back in the bottle. Bad luck.
Paul,
it doesn't go back in the model with robotics either. Like, you're not going to uninvent them.
Well, the only way you do is you get to scrub the world, and I can point at a couple of apocalyptic books that people could read that that happens, and that ain't fun either.
No. I want to thank you for that book that you talked about, the apocalyptic view, going back to religious end of days.
I'll shoot you over. I'll shoot you over the title and the author. I picked it up out of the book section of the New York Times a few Sundays ago, and went, whoa, I got to get this. That was fun. Paul, absolutely fantastic, great book. Adopting AI, the people first approach. Again, thank you for spending time and effort to come out here. The floor is open for you to promote anything you'd like. Obviously, we want people to go buy the book.
Adopting AI is all I'm promoting right now. I was saying to someone that book promotion is so hard, so I was thinking of opening an OnlyFans page to promote my wares. Someone thought that I should be careful saying that. I was like, if you think a 65-year-old man is a candidate for OnlyFans, I don't think you understand the business model. But anyway, adopting AI, folks, grab it on Amazon and connect with me on LinkedIn if you like Paul Gibbons. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. It's lovely being here. We always have such fun conversations, you and me, actually. We should do this more often.
I've enjoyed them over the years, the ones that we've had. Matter of fact, I went on vacation for a little while last year, and it wasn't the first one because I thought that's what I had, but it was the second one. I was pointing that out and republished it as one of my top favorites, at least on my end. So, Paul, this is probably going to make my top 10 list for the year. So thank you again for spending the time.
Great to talk to you.
The Software Process and Measurement Cast is brought to you by Mastering Work Intake by Tom Cagley and Jeremy Willits. Buy a copy. Link in the show notes. J. Ross Publishing, Amazon. It's all about helping you stop feeling overwhelmed and taking control of the mess that work intake can cause. In the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 861, we'll begin an 8-week rewind, sort of a spring rewind, featuring 8 of my favorite panel discussions. We'll be back on June 21st, right before it becomes summer, with new content and stories. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?